Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along today. The format of the session is that we are going to be hearing at the start from Jules Owen. Jules is our Silca trainer and does a number of other training courses for council officers as well. So I'm delighted that she's agreed to support us in this session, and Jules will do a little bit more to introduce herself shortly. We're going to have a brief session on new councillor induction. I would ask you please to leave your questions to the end of Jules's presentation, and if you are happy for your question to be part of today's recording, then we will go into that session when Jules has finished. After we've had an opportunity for some Q&A, I will be handing over to Teresa Strange from the Wiltshire and Swindon branch of the SLCC to give us an update on what they're doing. And then we will end the recorded session. We'll go into a closed session so that anybody who's got any queries, anything they're working through and would appreciate some advice on, or perhaps some shared knowledge, then we can go into that before the end of the session, which will hopefully be around 1 o'clock. So with that in mind, I am now going to hand over to Jules, and this is going to involve the swapping of our shared screens. So hopefully, if the technology is our friend, this will be seamless. So over to you, Jules.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Ian. Can you all see my screen sharing now?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Right, in that case, good morning, everybody, and thank you to Ian for the introduction. We're going to take a whistle-stop tour around having new councillors and the induction process. Before we start, we probably have clerks here from parish and town councils and maybe city councils. So I wanted to say that we'll be using the generic term local councils, which covers all three of those. And it's important to note that the same legislation applies to all of those: town councils, parish councils and city councils, regardless of their size. So whether tiny parish councils up to a large parish, town and city councils. So first things first, we've got new councillors and we've got some legislation to comply with. Most of the legislation is in the Local Government Act 1972 and the Localism Act 2011. I'm not going to particularly quote legislation throughout the session, but if anybody does need to know what it is for whatever reason, don't hesitate to ask me. So once the elections are over, the legal requirements is firstly to sign, all councillors must sign a declaration of acceptance of office. So this is regardless of whether they're new councillors or whether they're returning councillors. At or before the annual meeting of the new council, they must sign their declaration of acceptance of office. If they can't do it for any reason, then the council needs to pass a resolution at that first annual meeting to confirm that it's happy for it to be done before the next ordinary meeting. Just a point here, the annual meeting of the council following the election on the 1st of May must happen between the 6th of May and the 20th of May. Normally it would have been from the Monday, but it's a bank holiday. So the annual meeting of the council must take place between the 6th of May and the 20th of May inclusive. And they say all members of the council at that time must sign their declaration of office before or at that meeting. So they can't take their seat until they've signed it. If they don't sign it and there are no resolutions passed them to sign it before the next ordinary meeting, then they cease to be members and you have a vacancy, and then you would need to advertise that casual vacancy. So it is, setting legislation is very important. The other point at the annual meeting, which is going to happen between the 6th of May and the 20th of May, is that the council, the first item on the agenda will be to elect a chairman. So it must be the first item on the agenda. If the outgoing chair of the council has not sought re-election or has not been elected, he or she is expected to oversee the election of their successor. And in this scenario, the outgoing chair does not have a vote, but if a casting vote is required, then they would be required to have that casting vote. The agenda for the remainder of the annual meeting will be outlined in your standing orders, and you would follow that as normal. Just one point actually about it's not a legal requirement for the council to elect a vice chairman. It's good practice, but it's not a legal requirement. And equally, it's not a legal requirement for the vice chairman, if they are elected, to sign a declaration of acceptance of office. Only the chairman must do that. The other thing that the councillors must do, and it's the council's responsibility, it's not your responsibility, but it's the council's responsibility, they must complete their members of register of interests, and this must be done within 28 days of them taking office. If they fail to do this, it's a criminal offence and can lead to fines of up to £5,000 or possible disqualification from holding office for up to 5 years. I understand that with Wiltshire Council, it's done online. You have a link, there's a link on their website, which the councillors follow the link and complete their members' register of interest. Or I understand some clerks, maybe the councillors fill a paper copy in and then the clerk sometimes actually upload it onto the link. So that is, it's not your responsibility, but you need to make them aware of their responsibility. Again, that's in the Localism Act. So very important, they complete their members' register of interests. So moving on to talking about induction, having got those sort of basic things out of the way. A strong induction helps new councillors feel confident, informed and ready to contribute effectively from the start. It supports good governance and teamwork from day one. So 2 ways of doing an induction. You can have a good practice to have an induction pack. So that's, things for a bit of bedtime reading for the new councillors. I've listed down there some of the things that you could include in that induction pack. It could be a printed copy, or equally it could be a digital resource. So a welcome letter from the chairman, key details, information, contact details, meeting schedule, maps or parish boundary info, government documents, basically standing orders, financial regulations, those basic documents there. And also linked to the NALC booklets, Good Councillor's Guide, Being a Good Employer, and the Good Councillor's Guide to Finance and Transparency. They're all useful, easy reading little booklets that they can read. There are most of those have been updated, and the latest copy is available online from the WALC website. So alongside an induction pack, it's good to have an induction pack, because that's something they can sit and physically read and they can refer to. So that's it's good for them. But also having a proper formal induction is also really good. It doesn't need to last for hours, and it's something that you can do. We're going to work through one now as a suggested induction. Obviously, if you did use this, we're going to circulate these slides. If you did decide to use it, you would tailor it to your council's requirements. So we'd start off by welcoming everybody and thanking them for stepping up to serve their community. Obviously, introduce yourselves and ask them to go around the room, ask them to give them give names, and maybe just one reason why they stood for election or co-option. It's serves as a bit of an icebreaker. Then we need to explain, what is a parish council? What is a local council? So it's it's a corporate body which has a variety of powers and duties, all of which impact directly on the community. It's the first tier in local government, funded by the community via the local council tax precept. It's a tier of local government closest to the community, and it exists to make and implement decisions, but must proceed with due care and attention to the law at all times. It can own land, enter into contracts, and councils can be the subject of court proceedings. So, role of the parish councillor. They need to know what their role is so they can fulfil it properly. So it's to represent the interests of the whole community, attend meetings regularly. Having accepted the position of public office, they are now under an obligation to attend as and when required. They should prepare for meetings properly, taking time to read the supporting documents so that they can contribute to the discussions and the decision-making process. Important to note that they need to understand that councillors cannot make decisions independently. They are made a collective decision-making process. They cannot make decisions independently, not any of them. So they must work as a team and work with the other councillors and also the clerk. And they're bound by meeting conclusions. So even if they oppose them in the discussions, once the decision is being made, they are bound by that conclusion. And during the meetings, they must contribute. They should be should be helpful and relevant to the discussions, and they should respect the rules. Just a quick note about attendance there. We talked about attendance. Councils need to attend meetings. If they fail to attend a meeting, that be either a council meeting or a committee meeting, for 6 months without prior approval, they automatically cease to be a member by law. That is unless the councillor formally approves their absence before the 6-month period expires. And if they start down that route and maybe they'll get to 5 meetings, they haven't attended one. If they then attend a meeting, either a council meeting or a committee meeting, that resets the clock and they start again. So they have 6 months. It's after 6 months has lapsed, that is when they cease to be a member. So the legal framework I mentioned earlier on, that's mainly governed by the Local Government Act 1972 and the Localism Act. Although councillors are not paid as such, they are volunteers, although with some expenses payable. They are usually described as holders of public office, so not particularly as volunteers, holders of public office. They must act within the law at all times, uphold transparency and accountability. Councils as a whole have a wide range of powers and duties. So powers are optional or discretionary, which enables a council to undertake an activity or something. And then there are duties that are set in law in these here, and if they're duties, they are mandatory and the council must do them, otherwise they'll be acting ultra vires. The new councillors need to know about the code of conduct. So they must abide by the members' code of conduct. Majority of councillors will adopt the Wiltshire Council Code of Conduct, and I understand that WALC also has one available if you need one. So the Code of Conduct sets out the expected standards of behaviour and is based on the 7 principles of public life, which are selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. Councillors must declare their interests and avoid any conflicts. So it says there they must, which means it's a legal requirement that councillors must declare interests at meetings. So how does the council work? The new councillors need to know, how it works and what is expected of them. So councils meet regularly with council meetings and committee meetings. Important for them to know that these meetings are open to the press and public. So they are meetings open. They're not public meetings. They are meetings open to the press and public. Meetings must be properly convened, which includes summoning the councillors with an agenda, giving details of the business to be transacted. We must give the proper 3 clear days notice. So that means that doesn't count the day that the agenda is published. You count 3 clear days. It doesn't include the date of the meeting. It doesn't include Sundays and bank holidays. Some clerks do take Saturdays into account, but legally it doesn't say you can't use a Saturday. So you must give this 3 clear days notice. And then also we have to display a public notice for the public in a conspicuous place in the community so that the public are also aware of the meeting coming up. The meeting must be quorate. That means with a minimum of 3rd members present or a minimum of 3. If the quorum is not present, no business can be transacted. So the meeting would be deferred, held over to the next meeting. The clerk sets the agenda in consultation with the chair and also records the meeting, records the minutes. So thinking about staff, the new councillors need to know about what their role is with regard to staff. So the clerk is a proper officer, often also the responsible financial officer, but not always. They're called they are the proper officer of the council, but they're often referred to as the clerk in day-to-day business. They're employed by the council to provide administrative support for council's activities and implement council decisions. They provide independent professional advice and manage day-to-day operations. The clerk, as the most senior member of staff, is usually delegated to manage other staff on behalf of the council. So thinking about the budget and the finances, councillors need to know about this and what their responsibilities are. So local councils are funded through the precept. Often councils will have other income streams. It could be from allotments, burials, room hire, solar farms, sports fields, things like that. The council must approve the budget and monitor spending, so that has to be an agenda item that must be approved by the whole council. The budget must be, and I say an agenda item is therefore minuted. The financial regulations set out the rules for managing the money. And another important point here, the RFO is responsible for managing the financial affairs of the council on a day-to-day business, but the council is ultimately responsible for the finances as a corporate body. So at the end of the day, the council, the buck stops with the council. The council have a duty to manage public money that is laid out in the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015. That means it mentions they collectively are responsible for the stewardship of the public funds. They're also governed by the financial regulations set by the council, and they must ensure proper budgeting, accounting and use of the parish precept. So communication and conduct, very important. Again, the councillors need to know, how this is going to affect them so that they know they can adhere to, comply with it. So use of a council email, this is really important, both for data protection and also for professionalism. Parish council should use a parish council address and not a personal one. The risks of using a personal email address is if there's a data breach, personal liability or ICO investigation, if there's a freedom of information requests, the councillor's private email address, they've got loss of privacy because there'll be access to their full inbox. And also it helps to keep their private emails and their council work, keeps them very separate and avoids some confusion for them. Confidentiality is really important, obviously. They must be aware, particularly on social media, they need to be separating whether they're representing the council or whether they're doing it in their personal, as a person. So they must maintain confidentiality, especially around staffing issues, tendering or other sensitive issues. They're required to maintain confidentiality to protect sensitive information, ensure trust and comply with legal and ethical responsibilities. When they're thinking, best practice for councillors, if they're thinking about, when you talk about confidentiality, they need to think, is this public information? Should it be out in the public domain? They should avoid discussing council matters on social media and also on WhatsApp and other messaging apps. They shouldn't forward emails marked confidential without permission. And in meetings, they must respect the confidential session rules. And obviously, when they receive the documents and supporting documents for those confidential sessions, that they must be careful with them. Quite a lot of councils will actually issue their supporting documents for things that are in a confidential session on a different colour paper, so it's very clear to them that it is confidential and should be taken care of. Other councils will actually print their supporting documents for the confidential sessions. They'll use a different colour print, so it's really clear for the councillors to know that it's confidential and they've got to take care of it. So working together, councils work best when councillors are acting respectfully and supportively. Councillors cannot act independently. Decisions are made collectively. Even the chairman does not have any authority to make decisions. So they need to respect boundaries between councillors, the clerk and the staff. Policies of councillors, the new councillors need to know about. So standing orders, this is the rules and regulations of how the meetings are run mainly, and how decisions are made, and general day-to-day running of the council. Financial regulations, they assist in the, basically they're the rule book for managing the finances. They set out how everything should be done, and helps guard and protect the public money and how it's handled. Code of conduct, general data protection, equality policy, publication scheme, all things that the councillors need to be aware of, and they need to have training in general data protection so they know what their responsibilities are, particularly in relation to that. So all these policies should be made available to the new councillors. Often they'll be on the website, and if they're not, then the clerk, you need to make sure they've got access to them. So getting started, in their induction pack, you need to remind them about completing their declaration of acceptance of office and also their members' register of interest within 28 days of taking office. They need to read the key documents we've talked about and the policies, because they need to know how that affects them now that they're part of this council. You need to encourage them to go on training. Some councils, some clerks find it really difficult to get councillors to attend training. Often the ones that have been councillors for years, they don't think they need training. Often they are the ones that do need the training, but there is no legal requirement for them to go on training. All you can do is encourage them. Encourage them to ask questions from the clerk. Encourage them, let them know that support is always available from the clerk. If they've got any questions or queries, don't hesitate to ask. You might end your session. You might want to make it a little bit light-hearted, see if they've been paying attention. You might do a little quiz. There's a few questions there you could ask. They maybe suggest they work in pairs, and then share the feedback. So that's just a way of wrapping it up. And hopefully a little bit of light-hearted at the end. Encourage them to ask questions, explain what happens next, when the first council meeting is going to be, how you'll supply the documents and things like that, and what their contact with the clerk will be, and obviously thank them for the time and commitment. And that is basically where we are. So I'm going to hand back to Ian now. I can stop sharing. Oh yeah, here we go.
Thank you, Jules. That's excellent. Now I need to go. I'm going to start sharing as well. If you remember, everybody, we are still recording. So if anybody has any questions now, then they will be part of the recording. We do have a question in the chat. I will do my best to try and look at sort of hands up and stuff like that, but we do have a question in the chat from Karen Allingham. Karen, are you happy to ask your question now, or would you prefer it if we did it later in the session?
I don't mind. It's up to you. You know more about it anyway.
If you're happy to fire away, then let's do it now.
Okay. It says, can I co-opt straight after election of the chair, but before the election of vice chair?
Yes, I can't. Yes, because it's not a legal requirement to elect a vice chair. I think that would be absolutely fine. Yes.
Okay, that's great, because yeah, I need to know that for definite. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you.
We do have another question from Karen. This time I don't have a surname, so I'm not sure which Karen, but I mean, if it helps, I can read it out. Do previous councillors need to complete the declaration of acceptance?
Yes, absolutely. All councillors, 4 days following the election, they cease to be members, and then the new members come then. So yes, all members, whether they're returning or new members, must sign a declaration of acceptance of office. They're all starting a new term of 4 years.
We have had a question as well about whether the slides will be shared. They will. We've got a few hands up, so I'm going to kick things off with Ian Harvey. If Ian is happy to, presumably Ian, you're happy to ask your question on the recording. You're going to have to unmute yourself.
we go. I should be unmuted now.
That you're there.
It's a very simple question. You talk about the annual meeting being the 6th to the 20th of May. I'm in the unfortunate situation of having no quorum after the nominations, and we're going to have a second election. What happens to the annual meeting then? When must I hold the annual meeting?
Oh, that's a really good question, Ian. And I'm not sure I know the answer to it. It's like you said, you haven't got a quorum, you can't have a meeting, can you?
No, I can't. So what's happened is that Wiltshire Council have told us that we will have to have another election, which is quite interesting as we didn't have enough nominations the first time. But anyway, hopefully we will get enough nominations the second time. We're working hard on that. But so we don't know when the meeting's going to be, but when the election is going to be. But presumably, I have to hold the annual meeting within
14
number of days of the election being completed.
Yes, I would suggest actually within 14 days. Normally it's within 14 days of the election. So
okay, I mean, and a sort of follow up to that is, if we don't have an election, i.e. we have fewer people nominated than there are seats, can I hold a meeting before the election would have taken place, or do I have to wait until after the election would have taken place?
Sorry, I don't say it again.
Okay, so we're going to have another election, but my guess is I won't have an election because there'll be fewer nominations than there are seats.
Yes.
So once the nominations are published and I discover that I have fewer nominations than I have seats, so there will not be an election.
Yes.
Can I have a meeting immediately, or do I have to wait until the election would have occurred?
I don't know for sure, but I would suggest it's after the election would have occurred. But
okay, because my concern is clearly that until that happens and I don't have a quorum, then I can't do any business. So the sooner that I can start in making decisions, particularly financial ones, then the better. So I will take your answer and I will go back and ask Wiltshire what the answer is.
Yeah, I was going to say I would refer you back to Wiltshire Council. They'll know.
Yeah, it's a nasty situation that I'd rather not be in. But
yeah.
I think also, Ian, if we won't labour this now, but if we want to sort of pick this up after the meeting, then I'm happy to sort of assist you going forward and providing you with some support. Okay, so we'll do that. The next question is going to come from Claire Mann.
Hi, thank you very much. So we, for the first time, are warded, and in one of our wards, we have 3 people standing for 2 vacancies. Can we co-opt at that initial first annual meeting, or does it have to be advertised?
It has to be advertised, but it can be done at the first meeting. So once you know that you need to have got vacancies, you can advertise straight away, and then you can co-opt at your first meeting.
So I don't have to wait for the council to have a resolution to co-opt. I can just do that off my own steam.
Well, it would be. Would you put a resolution on your annual meeting? Add it to the.
I mean, that's my thought, to co-opt for the 3 vacancies that we will have. Although there's one contested ward, and the other 3 are uncontested. So we then end up with 3 vacancies.
Yes, as I understand it, that you can advertise as soon as, now that the vacancies have closed, now that the nominations have closed, you can now advertise for your vacancies. And then the co-option decisions, they can be made, they can't be made until the newly election council take up their office, but they can be made certainly after that. So yes, at that meeting is fine once they've all taken their office.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Claire. I am going to come to David Martin, and I can see we've got Vivian Vines as well with a hand up. But before we do that, and we've got a couple of questions in the chat, and there was one thing that I thought was perhaps useful to clarify now, and it's the term annual meeting, because we're talking about both the annual parish council meeting and the annual parish meeting. I wondered whether Jules, it was worth sort of just clarifying which meetings which.
Yeah, so we're talking about the annual meeting of the parish council here. That is the council legally has to hold an annual meeting and a minimum of 3 other meetings. So this is the annual meeting of the parish council. It is not the same as the annual parish meeting. the annual parish meeting, I think, has to help between 1st of March and the 1st of June. So this is completely different. This is the annual meeting of the parish council.
Excellent stuff. Right, and David Martin, over to you.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, what actually, I was thinking of that question earlier about the quorum and whether the existing council, it will be, if you're quorum now, the existing council, obviously that's the one that will be meeting, wasn't it, up to the day of the election, the current council can meet. So I think that would probably, you couldn't have a different meeting, it would be whoever's on the council now. That was one point. But the other one was, you didn't mention, Jules, the something that we've got, have got for the first time in years is the general power of competence. We can get that back. We weren't core, but sorry, we didn't have the 2/3 people standing in the last 2 elections, but we've got it back. And can you explain how that works and how we deal with that at the first meeting? Thanks.
Yeah, certainly. So that's a really good point that you make there, that now following the election, it's every chance is the greater chance that you're going to have enough you're going to meet the criteria to have the 2/3 council members elected as opposed to being co-opted. And also you need to have a qualified clerk, a suitably qualified clerk. That's either with SLCC or one of the level 4 qualifications. So once you meet that 2 criteria at the annual meeting, you then add an agenda item that to the effect that the council confirms that it meets the criteria to adopt the general power of competence, and then that is at an agenda item on the at that annual meeting. And then once that's been the council approve that, a resolve that the council does meet the criteria, you then are ready to go on and use the general power of competence.
And that lasts the full 4 years, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's only if let me just clarify that point. You'll then meet the criteria. So as long as you still meet that criteria, if at any time but during the next 4 years, if you lose, you don't get your 2/3 members being elected, you have some vacancies which are then co-opted and you no longer meet that criteria, or if your clerk leaves and he's no longer still qualified, no longer got the right qualification, and it needs to be the clerk, it can't be a deputy clerk or an assistant, it needs to be the official proper officer of the council must hold the qualification. If that also changes and that's no longer the case, then you're not allowed to start any new projects. You need to you can continue with anything you started, but any new projects that you start, you would then have to go back to identifying the relevant power to be able to carry out that activity. So you don't renew annually. As long as you continue to meet the criteria, then that is fine. But if at any stage you don't meet the criteria of 2 councillors, 2/3 of councillors elected, and also have a qualified clerk, then you can no longer carry on using general power competence. You must go back to identifying the suitable power.
Thank you.
I'm just having a look to see. We had one other question in the. Oh, actually, we have got a hand up. Maria Pennington, did you want to?
Yeah, just
ask
a quick question. Could you just confirm about the what makes the quorum? So if we've got 11 seats, I believed that we needed 4 to be quorum. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
And with regards to the general power of competence, and we've got 11 seats, I would need to have 8 that have been have renominated themselves, or
yeah, you'd need to have 8 councillors. You round up, so yes,
that round up. That's okay. Thank you very much.
8 councillors. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we've got one other question for you, Jules. You've been absolutely fantastic. Thanks very much for giving us your time today. After we've had this session, there'll be we're going to get an update from our SLCC branch, and then I think if there's an opportunity, Jules, if you're happy to just give us a couple more minutes, then we might, that gives people an opportunity to ask a question if they didn't want to do it on the recorded session. But there was a question that came up I saw in the chat around the use of .gov emails, and I just wondered whether you could clarify sort of what's the legal situation. You mentioned obviously in the presentation that councillors are required to have their own council address for council business and not use their own personal address, but there's obviously been a lot of publicity around the use of .gov emails, so I just wondered if you could clarify that situation for us.
Okay, so yeah, it's a tricky one really. So yes, it is definitely we're being encouraged to use .gov.org. .gov.uk email addresses, and up until now there's been no legal requirement to say that the councillors have got to use a council address. However, I understand that the practitioner's guide has just been updated, and that is saying now that the councillors can't use private email addresses. Although I would also point out that the practitioner's guide 25 is not legislation, it is just good practice, it's guidance. So I think there's still nothing saying in legislation that the councillors have got to use a council email address, but it's a strong guidance that saying it's been updated in the JPAG document, which has now just been renamed General Practitioner's Guide 2025, and that is strongly recommending or saying that they should have their council email addresses. But as I say, I also note that that is not legislation, that is just required good practice, that document. So still quite a grey area, but yeah, there's no definitive answer, I don't think, on that it's not a legal requirement, but definitely good practice.
Excellent. Now I am conscious of time. So what I'm going to do is move us on to the update from Teresa Strange. I noticed that Teresa's got her hand up, so it may be that she wants to kick off with a question herself, which I'm more than happy to do. But it does seem that this is a good opportunity to hear from Wiltshire and Swindon SLCC. And I did notice we did have a question from Michael Bromley Gardner, which I'll come to the moment we've finished with the SLCC update, and then we can begin the rest of the session while we've still got a bit of time left. Okay, so well, Teresa, over to you.
Thanks, thanks, Ian. Yes, I did have a question and a comment before we get to the SLCC. So our parish council, all our councillors that have stood have been returned unopposed, and we've got some vacancies. Can they sign their declaration of office before the 6th of May, or do they have to wait until they've technically themselves stood down?
I guess I'm thinking that they have to wait till they've stood down. So the legislation says at or before the annual meeting.
Okay. So when they stood down, and it was just a reminder, especially those that have been returned uncontested, so they haven't put leaflets out and in. Whilst it's not our responsibility to remind councillors, it could be easily done to not submit your expenses, even if it's a nil return. So a reminder to your councillors to do that if they've been, particularly if they've been returned uncontested and haven't leafleted and spent money. Just a reminder on that. So yeah, welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm the chair of the Wiltshire branch of the SLCC for Wiltshire and Swindon. For those that don't know, that's the Society of Local Council Clerks. I'm not sure if there's members on here who, or clerks on here rather, and councils that aren't aware of what the SLCC are. We're the professional body for clerks, and we have probably about 260, well, about 50% of the 260 odd to 280 councils in Wiltshire and Swindon as members. WALC certainly has more members. Some of the things we do are for those that are members of that professional body. We have meetings every 2 months, and they are the other month that this WALC meeting is. So officers have a chance every month to have this networking session. But we do have an annual training day, or it's likely to be in the early part of 2026 now, that everybody is welcome to, whether you're a member of the SLCC or not. If you're clerks, if you're councillors here rather than clerks and clerks, you are most welcome to come along to a first meeting without being a member, to see whether it's for you and to find out information. And we also have mentors, and again, that's provided for all clerks, whether you're a member of the SLCC or not. And just a quick plug really for our next session, which is on Friday, the 16th of May. I think we're just confirming with Caution. I don't think that's a surprise to Dave Martin that Caution are hosting us on Friday, the 16th of May. And our speaker is Liz Batten, and she's coming from the Wiltshire Police, particularly about Operation Awake, which is for... it's been running a few years now, and it's for, don't be put off if you're not a woman, but it's for women in public life, particularly if they're receiving abusive emails or comments on social media. Please come if you're not female, the advice will be appropriate to everybody, but they are going to come and talk to us, and they have issued a briefing note which has gone out to everybody. They're hoping to contact the candidates that are standing and campaigning at the moment through Wiltshire Council. So I hope that's of interest to everybody.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Teresa. So we'll move into our sort of our open session that's now closed. Thank you very much, Jules, for your time. We are going to kick off. So if anybody has been holding on to some questions, then we'll get into that in a second. I'm just going to confirm that we're stopping the recording.